Might as well go ahead and file this news story under the yeah, no shit category. Seems that scientists are slowly starting to pull their heads out of their asses when it comes to the demise of the megafauna at the end of the last ice age, where about 130 species of big old beasts over 100 pounds, mammals over 100 pounds, went extinct, roughly within about 1,000 years or so. And I remember when I was a kid, 30 fucking years ago in elementary school, the explanation was overhunting. We killed off all these species like the mammoths and saber-toothed tigers and whatnot. And they also threw in for a little extra spice that a lot of these animals were so dumb that they just walked right off the edges of cliffs by the millions. Or that the saber-toothed tigers were so dumb that they just walked into the La Brea tar pits, one right after another like a fucking conveyor belt of ignorance. And that's how a lot of these went extinct. That's how I was taught as a little kid. But when you start putting some evidence together and looking at the whole scope of things, not just the fossil records and not just geological records, not just climate records, you start looking at the whole picture of things, you start to realize that, yeah, of course climate change was responsible for the demise of those fucking animals back then, about 13,000 to 10,000 years ago or so, when these all like 130 species went extinct. They still won't use the word catastrophe, which I don't understand, because we know goddamn well that Earth has been just destroyed by shit from space numerous times, over and over again, led to the extinction of the dinosaurs that we all know about. But for some reason, when it comes to this latest mass extinction event, they're so against it being a catastrophe that it's almost bordering on delusional at this point when, like I said before, mounting evidence and various fields of science are all, you compile that and you can realize that shit, something catastrophic did happen on Earth, not once but twice during the Younger Dryas period, which was, see on this chart here, going back about 50,000 years of climate data. Earth's climate was pretty fucking wild during the ice age there. And then you can see a massive spike about 13 to 14,000 years ago, which then trickled back down into another full-on glacial period, roughly about 1,200 years long, and then another massive spike. And these spikes are about 20 and 18 degrees Fahrenheit respectively. So this was catastrophic change on Earth happening extremely quick, which would obviously point to how the glaciers melted so rapidly, because if you think about that, for how big them fucking glaciers were, covering all of Canada, Greenland, parts of Northern Europe, up to 3 miles thick of ice, there's no natural known source of energy on Earth that could put enough heat into the atmosphere to melt those glaciers as fast as they melted. It would, I mean, just logic would tell you that it would have to come from somewhere, and outer space is the only other place it's coming from. Volcanoes don't do shit to melt glaciers. If anything, they help expand them, because you put the Earth under this shield of dust for years, maybe decades at a time. It's going to lower the Earth's temperature, make the snow, each year's snowfall, pack into ice. So volcanoes, out of the question. Like, what else on Earth could possibly put enough heat? Because the Toba eruption, 70,000 years ago, well during the time of the last glacial period, Toba erupted. The arguments in the top 3 most devastating volcanoes eruptions ever known on Earth. And that did absolutely nothing to melt the glaciers. They were around for tens and tens of thousands of more years after Toba erupted, trucking just fine. Didn't probably even fucking notice that a volcano had erupted. So it's really encouraging that scientists are slowly starting to accept the fact that something catastrophic happened. They still won't, like I said, won't go into the word catastrophe, but they got to explain this climate change somehow, right? You can see in the fucking, these are ice cores from Greenland. You can look back roughly 250,000 years with these ice cores. Obviously something devastatingly catastrophic happened extremely quickly on Earth twice within this span of just a couple thousand years. And so Randall Carlson is a really good one if you're interested in this kind of stuff. If you've never heard of Randall Carlson before, he's the man to really get your information from on this. And hopefully, if the COVID stuff ever clears up and we can go back to business as usual, traveling around and stuff, I'd like to actually make a documentary about all of this, traveling to different sites and getting video with drones and stuff like that, so you can see from the bird's eye view of how unbelievably immense these floods and the catastrophe of, I think it was a comet breaking up, impacting the ice sheet, which caused I'll get into that at other videos in the future, but you got a big old punch in Saginaw Bay where it looks like or something would have hit, created a big old crater. That would have been covered in ice back then, thousands of feet of ice. That impact would have sent shit flying up into the atmosphere, like millions and millions of pieces of ice, the glacier, busted and blown into the atmosphere, rains back down on Earth, which is almost certainly what formed the Carolina Bays. You need more information and studying on those to try to narrow down their time of creation and whatnot, but they all sort of point right at Saginaw, Michigan. If you were to draw lines, they're all oriented in the same direction. There's hundreds of thousands of them all along the eastern seaboard, like Georgia, maybe into Florida, all the way up to New Jersey. So obviously something was raining down from the sky to cause all these like I said, hundreds of thousands that still exist after 10,000 years. Something happened to cause them. So you can add, like, fuck the woolly rhino. It wasn't hunted to extinction. Like, none of the mammoths were. There were 4 species of mammoths around back then. There was 2 species of enormous bear that make polar bears look like a joke compared to how big these fucking bears were. You know, the saber-toothed cats, the giant ground sloth that when standing on its hind legs would have been 15 feet tall. All the big-ass armadillos that we had, just enormous, monstrous creatures. There's no fucking way that Paleo-Indian, like, hunter-gatherers with stone-tipped spears are hunting these things to extinction all around the globe. There's no way. I've been using guns since I was about 8 years old, and I can tell you, like, even using a gun, it's fucking hard to kill animals. And you expect, I'm not even dealing with these monstrous beasts. Like, the woolly mammoth is one of the smaller of the 4 species of the proboscideans, the elephants that were around back then. There was one that it was just like 15 feet at the shoulder. This thing was fucking enormous, and there was millions of them. And you're trying to tell me that, the human population back then, 10 million at maximum? You're telling me that these people all orchestrated this plan to fucking hunt over 130 species of megafauna, mammals over 100 pounds, to extinction? Ain't fucking buying it. It was a catastrophe, and if you want to learn more about that, get to Randall Carlson and check that shit out. His podcast called Cosmographia, Cosmo with a K, Cosmographia, on YouTube. It's about a year's worth of episodes so far. They usually do one every week or so. Fucking get in on that. Stay tuned to here, because I'm going to get into this shit as well. It is completely fascinating, and hopefully next year we can try to get some shit together. I can get a trip planned out to stop at different locations around the country, maybe even up into Canada, get some video footage of this stuff, put a little documentary together or something. We'll see how that goes. I'll probably need to do a fundraiser for that, because it's going to be fucking expensive, like zipping all over the country and shit. So stay tuned for that. And like I said, look into Randall Carlson if you're interested in this, and he goes into extreme detail about all of this. So hopefully you enjoyed this. There'll be more in the future, and good night.